Hello and welcome to another episode of Guide to the Grind. As always, I'm your host, Jeff Eady. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Thanks for subscribing. And today's email, we'll hop right into it. The episode today, we're going to talk about emails and who taught you how to write your emails. I remember personally, I first learned how to write a business email back in high school in the mid-90s. And as I mentioned in the email, yes, I am getting up there, but that's not the point. The point is, when I learned how to write an email, I learned from somebody who probably didn't do a lot of email writing. Now that's interesting because my teacher back in the mid 90s, they were a teacher, so I highly doubt they sent a lot of business emails. And also, because it was the mid 90s and the internet wasn't really a thing, I doubt that he ever actually wrote an email. Not that he was a bad guy, he was following the curriculum. I get that. But for me, that model that I learned when I was a teenager has stuck with me till now I'm in my 40s. And somewhere along the way, I realized that that wasn't the best way to communicate. I'll give you an example. Have you ever sent an email to a coworker or to somebody that you're trying to do business with, and after the first few emails, all of the formalities drop away? You stop signing off with "regards, Jeff" at the end of the email, and it just tends to be a couple of sentences back and forth. And there's a level of familiarity there that makes the emails casual and more of a conversation. And that's what we should really be striving for in all of the emails that we put out. I recently reread Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. And one of the interesting things that I discovered in there that I missed the first time I read it was that in different cultures, the onus of communication is placed on different people. In the Western world, in North America, the onus of communication is based on the person who is doing the communicating. In other words, the sender of the communication. So that means that everything you send out has to be well thought out, well planned, in order to communicate what you're actually trying to communicate. Have you ever had a misunderstanding via text or email where you said one thing and somebody totally took it in a different way? That's because it's a lot harder to convey messages just in writing because we're missing most of the communication, which is all body language. So it's important to change the structure of the emails to make it fit the way that we speak. And that's what I strive to do every time I send out an email. I cut it up so that it sounds more like, so that it reads in an internal voice, more like I would speak than somebody just reading from a novel or a script as they're understanding what I'm trying to say. Now I'll give you an example of misunderstanding in the communication. It's kind of funny, there was a girl a number of years ago that I went on a great date with, and we had a great time. And I texted her saying, thank you, I had a great time, we should do that again. And she texted back, no thank you. Of course, I had to get over the pain of the rejection in the beginning. But what I came to understand years later, of course, I didn't really want to respond anymore. I thought that was a bad message. But what she was actually saying, and we cleared it up many years later, was she was saying, no, thank you. Because of that slight misunderstanding, we took totally separate paths. And that happens every day in the communications that we're having. So the idea of email is actually to progress out of email into either a face-to-face or a phone call conversation. It's much easier to understand what's happening in those conversations. But since we have to use emails, why not use them far more effectively than we were taught to use them originally? So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to cut down that formality and make it seem like a much more familiar thing. We're going to drop things like proper grammar, sentence structure, punctuation. I have a friend who, whenever she reads my stuff, it drives her absolutely nuts because my grammar, my punctuation, and my sentence structure, they don't make sense following the rules. But when you read what's being said there, whether it's internal dialogue or whether it's an external voice and you're reading it aloud, it actually sounds much more like a conversation than somebody getting a formal email. So, one of the big things I find is that emails, people tend to send large chunk paragraphs. And what happens in our brains when we're trying to process all of that information, we actually miss most of it. I know personally, if I get an email with a lot of words in it, I have to continue to read that email over and over again. Have you ever had it where you sent an an email to somebody and you had a bunch of questions that you needed them to answer, and you listed those questions in the email. And then when you got a response, it was simply a copy and paste of your email with their responses in there, and it took you some time to decipher what they were trying to say. I'm sure that's happened. If it hasn't, it will. It's happened to me a number of times. And what I find is the only reason we're doing that is because we're missing so much information. It's easier to break it down into that one question at a time and answer those with the visual reference in front of us. So whenever we're sending out an email, what we're trying to do is actually get people to understand one key idea. That's the most important thing. Whenever you have an email, you need to be trying to convey one key idea with every message. In other words, slow down the communication. Allow the other person to talk back and have an actual conversation. It's going to take you eventually out of an email because they'll want to have a conversation with you. But the easiest way to do that is by asking questions. So one of my favorite emails, I consider it to be the best email ever written. If you've read the book, it's in there. It is simply an email that is designed to get people to give you a response from a part of your list that hasn't responded in a long time. All it is simply 9 words strung together, and there is something magical about that combination of 9 words, but it's an obligatory question. In other words, I'll reach out to somebody and say, hey Jeff, are you still interested in marketing? And then just sign off. I know that seems really simple and you want to tell people more, but what happens is when people get that, especially if it's coming from a mass email, you don't have to send them out one at a time, people tend to feel different about that email. There's an energy shift in it. It feels like it's coming directly from you, even though it's going to an entire list. And what happens is you end up getting a massive response rate. I know we sent this out once to an email list. There was about 5,000 people on it. Within 24 hours, we had 147 responses to that one email. And that was for a company that hadn't had a single response from their email list in 2 years prior to that. To have 147 responses, positive responses, in 24 hours was unbelievable. And that's from a list that wasn't highly targeted. We talked about targeting in one of our other videos. That's just from a general list that was compiled over a number of years from different sources. The power of an email like that, if you have a portion of your list that hasn't been communicating with you in a while, say 6 months or more, try sending that email right there to see if they're still interested. If you're a realtor, you might want to put in, hey Gary, just wondering, are you still interested in buying a home? And wait for a response. Don't give them any information. That's the big thing is number one thing I was always taught years ago in sales, the number one thing that will get people to want to know more is curiosity. And leaving that door open. That obligatory question is either going to get them to completely ignore it, which is fine. People are going to ignore stuff and they're not going to pay attention. Or they're going to want to have a conversation with you after that. They're going to tell you, hey, you know what? I am still thinking about buying a house. I just haven't had time to get my head around it. Why are you asking? And now the conversation is opened up. A couple of other things that are going to make emails a lot easier for you to communicate is being brief. Those big blocks of information are way too hard to process. Try and convey that one idea every time. Ask questions, wait for the answers. If you're actually trying to have a conversation with somebody and draw information out or have a sales conversation through email, you need to understand what their needs are, what their fears are, all of those things. So ask a single question and wait for a response back. Slow down the conversation and have it go at your pace so that you're getting very clear communication with every email. If you ask too many questions, they might ignore or forget to answer some of the emails. And you know what, a big thing is just really talking like people talk. So I'm referring to my notes here, and I have a lot of trouble reading my own handwriting, which is just awesome. But if you look at, okay, you subscribe to my book, obviously, or you wouldn't be on the list getting this email. The second email that went out about 24 hours from the time that you subscribed to the book with a simple question. Hey, are you interested, are you new to marketing, or, gosh, I can't remember the question. Have you done much marketing, or are you a seasoned pro? Something to that effect. Now, that isn't going to get me a sale. That question is not designed to get somebody to buy anything. It's not designed to do anything other than to start a conversation. And that conversation is really the most important thing, because people send emails back all the time. I'd say I have a better than 50% response rate when that email goes out, and I don't know how many of those are actually going to junk email, so it would be even higher if spam filters allowed for it. But the point is, people respond because it sounds more like a conversation than a lengthy sales email telling them everything about my business and what I can do for them and the features and benefits and the price list, and if you want to go buy something, you got to go to this website. It's not about that. It's about building trust and building a relationship, and your emails should do that every time they go out. If we consider every communication that we have from our business to be marketing, it's important to understand that they all need to be drawing people towards you, instead of just putting all of your information out there and expecting people to go find it on their own. Draw the information you need from them out through your emails, and build a trust and relationship, so that when it does come time for them to buy, they're not going to think of anybody else. You're going to be top of mind. When somebody needs a tissue, they don't think of a generic brand. They think of Kleenex. You can be like, oh, I guess that's a bad metaphor. You don't want to be like a dirty Kleenex, but you can be that brand recognition that people are looking for. Like when you think of a plastic container, Tupperware did a great job of becoming the premier brand in the plastic container business. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, depending on who you talk to, those are the number one and number two brands when you think of pop. Or, for all my Canadians that are on the list, KD, got to be KD. I don't know if you guys have it in the States. I think you do. But everybody thinks of Kraft Dinner when they think of macaroni and cheese, or at least the box kind. So what I'm trying to convey there is build the trust, build a relationship, give it time, but treat it like you're just trying to understand them. Don't try and rush it. When you rush it and when you give all of your information up front, they have no reason to continue the conversation with you. And I guess that's really about what. Oh, you know what? One more thing. Quit signing off with things like sincerely or regards. Nobody does that in real life. Nobody. When's the last time you were on a phone conversation with somebody, at the end of it say, oh, you know what? Thank you for it. Have a good day. Regards. These are formalities that are left over from a bygone era. Sign off with something casual if you have to sign off, but for the most part, once you're in a conversation, the sign off is completely gone. Forget about the sign off. Once you're in that conversation, you're just having sentences back and forth. And then you'll eventually get, I think Dean Jackson calls it the love letter, where they'll have that trust with you, they'll understand that now you're friends and you might be able to actually help them, and they'll let you know the whole list of things. They'll send you the lengthy email of how you might be able to help them. And that's your chance to really understand what their needs are and how you might be able to help them with your business. That's the cue to move on to the next step. But until then, it's a conversation. Treat your emails as a conversation. And if you do have to send out a lengthier email, make sure you're breaking up all of the sentence structures into individual ideas. You can have 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph, but make sure that when you have a standalone idea that it's its own sentence. Also, if you want to emphasize a theme throughout the email, bold is a good thing to use in that emphasis. Sorry, I had to think of the word there. That emphasis, it's going to go past the conscious mind. Yes, people will notice it, but at the same time, the subconscious mind is going to register all of those themes as you go throughout it. And I highly recommend that you don't emphasize negative themes, only positive themes, because the negative themes don't register the same in the subconscious. The mind doesn't understand the difference between a yes and a no. Like, no doesn't compute with the subconscious mind. So only emphasize positive points or a general theme that you're trying to get across in that email. I think that's about it for this video today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you haven't downloaded the book, go to guidetothegrind.com, enter your email and your first name, grab a copy of Major Marketing Mistakes and Other Dumb Stuff to Avoid. And if you have subscribed, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you're watching me on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. I appreciate all of you. Have a fantastic day and happy marketing.